Good morning, everyone. Welcome again to Accuracy in America. I'm your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co-host, as always, Brian McNichol.
Hello, deplorables, drags, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, semi-fascists, and of course those dog-faced phony soldiers.
That's right. Okay. Well, I don't know what this weather's kind of up and down. I guess, huh? But we're getting the rain that we kind of needed in April. So
We did. You know what? It's like the flowers are kind of past peak on flowers now, especially with all the rain. But like we are coming to peak on it being lush and green and beautiful. I was up in your state not this past weekend, but the one before, and we ended up having to make a drive through the country to go about doing what we were doing, and it was just stupendously beautiful. And then I had one this weekend. Where I was this weekend was really gorgeous too. So, God's blessings, right?
yeah, since we usually wind up inevitably mentioning about something about climate change almost every week. I'm going to throw this out at the beginning. It's not even on the list, but I meant to. I wanted to discuss this with you just briefly, at least. So we had this big car wreck, car truck wreck, this big accident in Illinois due to a dust storm. And what was it? 72 cars, and I think 6 people died, and there's still some in the hospital. And it's a complete mess. Kind of what seemed to be an unusual circumstance, happening in Illinois. But of course, USA Today, I saw there was, they wanted to tie this to climate change. And yet in the article, they also mentioned, the fact that, there had been some like tilling of land on the farms. And so, and it'd been dry, and then they had some wind. And so naturally dry, dusty conditions were there, and the wind carried it and created this unfortunate situation where, you didn't have you had very low to no visibility. But, once again, it's like every little thing, climate change, this, climate change, that, it's kind of like, it's not going to be as bad as the Dust Bowl or, all these other conditions, agricultural and things like this. But they want to throw these things at you and just kind of prepare your mind so that they can continue this drumbeat, this narrative on all of this.
Right. I've been thinking about this lately. Like one of the things that really bugs me is when my kids turn in reports to school, they can only cite sources that have a GOV, EDU, or MIL suffix, right? So the only information you're allowed to consider is government paid science, right? So you're not allowed to look at the people saying, hey, wait a minute, the government completely full of it on this. You're not allowed to cite that in your report. You're not even allowed to know that there is two sides to this story, right? You're not even supposed to acknowledge that because there's not a lot under Gov, Mil, or EDU that says this, right? There is some stuff. There's a growing body of research that's pretty much putting the nail in the coffin of the, carbon dependent. Carbon is the, control knob to our future nonsense, right? And so, and the proof is pouring in, right? The coral reefs are rebuilding. A lot of, we had I think 4 continents this year had the coldest weather they've ever had, including North America. And now I guess Australia has joined the list. That was the recent one to join the list. So, there's a lot of things pointing to the fact that this, we're getting colder. And, we're up to 108 months now in a row with that's by my math, went to school in Louisiana, so it's kind of hard. 9 years. Right? 9 times 12, 9 years of no warming. So for a critical problem that's growing bigger by the day, it's taken a 9-year break, right? So, at what point do we quit honoring this shibboleth? At what point do we say, you guys are going to have to prove it's true? I think there's a large bunch of voters out there who are like, I'm sorry, but I don't notice a big difference in the weather. I don't notice that this is a catastrophe that I ought to pay, $2 more for gas and, $100 more a month for home fuel and so forth to cover. It doesn't look like that big a disaster to me. But it's a slow process, especially when you're not really allowed to argue it. And, your tweets are censored and all that kind of stuff. So, I think we got a lot of work to do here to like open the debate over what exactly is going on and what exactly the response should be.
Yeah. So I was, while you were talking, I also was, I went Saturday morning briefly to the annual Maryland Day at University of Maryland College Park. That was their 25th one. I've been to a handful in the recent years. I mean, there weren't any during COVID, but you know, I, I'm always kind of curious as to what's going on in my alma mater, and just seeing just the physical changes in the campus as they do construction. And we've got, it's a massive mess over there because they have the purple line, it's going to go straight through campus. And it's like, the purple line was never a very good idea before the pandemic. It's a terrible idea after the pandemic.
Yeah.
And they've got this campus. If you've been on the University of Maryland campus, the main drag there in front of the student union, it's a one lane road, one way only from Route 1, up, go up the hill, and that's it. You can't go the other way. Something like, what a crazy mess this is going to be. And they're not going to have that many students riding that darn thing. And there's going to be safety concerns and a whole bunch of other things. But I'm walking around there. I'm not sure I would have actually made as much of an effort to go, but as I scrolled through the program that I got in the email, I thought, oh, well, here's something. The English department was having their banned books giveaway, so I wanted to get up there and check that out. So I get up there. I managed to make my way up there by 10:15, thanks to some traffic accident on the Beltway. They're supposed to start at 10 o'clock, which I need to remember. If they do this again next year, I'm going to have to get up there earlier, because I get over to the banned book thing, like at 10:25, and they were all gone. I couldn't figure out what was going on there because they had given them all away, and everything like this. But as I tried to investigate this, because I thought, so maybe their website has got a banned books, the list of banned books. But what they've been doing for the last couple of years, at least, is they've been having a March book madness with all their banned books, and you vote via Twitter, I guess, or whatever, and they have brackets, and then you get to an eventual winner and whatnot. And I couldn't figure out who won for 2023 or 2022, but it was interesting, because actually the hashtag on Twitter for like March Book Madness, it's all about reading. It's like elementary schools and other schools about accomplishments in reading. No, right. University of Maryland English Department, it's all about, the banned books, for which the guy at the table was telling somebody else, he says, you can literally still buy these books online for maybe pennies or whatever. It's like, Spencer and I were talking about this. It's just like, they're banned books, but yet you can still buy them. Right. So,
Right. Their definition of banned is sort of strange.
Right.
So they're just talking about like not putting perverted books in elementary schools. Right. That's all we're talking about here. We're not trying to dim anybody's horizons. It's just, normal, what used to be known as common sense. But
yeah,
here we are.
So as I made my way around campus, and I was on the main hall there where the library is, and they have kind of their mall area with other buildings. So they have, and this goes back to this whole thing that we've just been talking about with the climate change. So a couple of booths that were there, the Office of Sustainability had a tent, and the Environmental Safety, Sustainability, and Risk Department, or whatever they are, they also had a tent. So I'm sitting here thinking, it's like, what, I know the city of College Park had a tent, and the College Park Police Department had a tent. But what would be the odds if someone on that has a differing view on the environment and climate change tried to apply to get a tent there? Do you think the University of Maryland would approve that?
Right. And the whole point of universities is to challenge what you think, right? You show up with a bunch of truths you've held dear your whole life, and they throw stuff at you and say, bounce this off your truths and see if they survive. Right. And, for all of us, if you're really, doing the work of college, some of your truths don't survive. Right. You learn things. You're like, okay, I didn't know that, and I need to reconsider what I think. Yeah. So that's right. He's right. So, it's shut down the other side. I don't know if you saw this, I guess it was Adam Gillette, in fact, who went to San Francisco State University. Remember I guess Riley Gaines, the swimmer who lost to Leah Thomas,
right?
The dude went out there and gave a speech about finishing second, and she's really, she really objects to how this went down, and she has a perspective. You can like it or not like it, agree with it. They went there and chased her out of the room, basically, and people were trying to hit her and stuff. And so he goes on the campus of San Francisco State and says, what did you think of how your campus responded to that? And they're like, she had it coming. I wish I was there too. It's like, you come here saying a message, we don't like, what do you expect is going to happen? It's the same as the Stanford lady saying, is the juice worth the squeeze to use your First Amendment rights if it's going to make all these people mad? And like this morning I was reading on Twitter, there's a lot of people, I guess, CNN is going to do a town hall with President Trump. And I guess it's next week sometime. And these people are like, he should not be allowed to do that. The CNN should not be allowed to put him on. I'm going to boycott CNN as if anybody was watching it anyway, for letting him say his piece, right? I mean, you can, you have the option of changing channels or not watching TV or muting it, put some music over it, or, all these things you can do to not watch it, right? It doesn't have to be part of your life. But they're like, he should not be allowed to say these things, right? He should not be allowed to explain himself at all. Okay, so that's a dangerous. I mean, the free speech battle is moving to a different platform, and it's a very dangerous platform because this is not, we're not talking about, yelling fire in a crowded theater here. We're talking about being able to express your views at all.
Yeah, I mean, how do you think that's gonna work out? I mean, my general my first impression, I guess, is just that CNN, one of the things they do understand is that Donald Trump is ratings gold in general. Yeah. And when you're in the basement of the cable news ratings, this is a coup. This for them will bring them eyeballs, and they will be very disappointed if they don't win the night. That the time slot, during that time that Trump is on. Now, how they treat Trump, it'll be interesting to see. But
he signed up for it. Whatever happens. He knows who CNN is too, right? He knows what they are. And then they put this, one of their most biased, uncredible reporters on it too. So I mean, really, really kind of made a joke of it with the person they assigned to it. A really unserious person.
Yeah, so it'll be kind of interesting to see how this turns out. I think there are going to be a lot of people going to tune in just to see what kind of fireworks may take place, because Trump is Trump. He's not the president now. He's a former president, and we've already seen him, go through his True Social and other things like that. He's expressed a lot of opinions since the election, and he will continue to do so. Obviously, he's running for president again. So this could be a fascinating night. And if you're the other cable news networks, is like, you're going to struggle to win that night because CNN's got Trump, and I can understand liberals. There's a lot of those liberal leftists that are like, oh, this is horrible, because they keep thinking that CNN is on their side all the time and that you can't have a Trump. And but I mean, there's still an agenda with CNN. I mean, what they hope to accomplish with it, but the bottom line is going to be ratings, and see if Chris Lichten, the gang over there, made the right decision in inviting him on there. We'll see. I mean, there could, for all I know, I mean, he could be out there. He could blast, Fox News a lot and make fun of him for a lot of stuff like that, which CNN will love to death.
They'll figure out a way for a second town hall if that happens, right?
You got that right. I did want to talk. So I've been hung up on this whole thing going on in France about this pension, changes, pension reform, because it just seems like I can't believe how dumb, how stupid these French people are, particularly the young people. But then maybe it's because they're young people. They take to the streets, how much they've been protesting this thing, and they turn the May Day into a violent situation. There was a lot of violence and things going on May Day, and yet they continue to miss the point on the whole pension issue, with them, and that they are just I don't know. I don't know what are they expecting to happen on this. It's just that let's keep the lifestyles of everybody now, but they don't understand. It's like the money is running out. I mean, the world is the replacement, of the world here, rate is very low. I mean, the U.S. is still, we're doing okay, but not great. But European countries, Asian countries are doing far worse, and they're struggling. And France knows. I mean, Macron had promised this, and he knows that they're facing a real problem down the line. But these young people, in particular, now they don't seem to understand how this works. What's going on.
So, a couple of things. First of all, France economically, if it were a state in the United States, it would be West Virginia. It's already, it's not going to be a problem. It is a problem. It's overrun with an immigrant population that doesn't understand or really have a meaningful way to deal with. It is essentially one big trade union, one big employer, the government and government adjacent industries, right? And so it is the final battle, in a sense, for trade union politics in France. Like, it's essentially like, Pennsylvania was run 40 or 50 years ago. And, it's what the unions want versus what management can give them. And so the unions have decided that, they can't go to from 62 to 64 or whatever. It's hard for us to judge this in the United States to an extent because ours has always been 65 and now it's going up to 68 or whatever. Right. So we look at it versus our numbers and we're like, even what they want to make you do is better than us, right? Is a year earlier than what we have right now, which is going to get worse here because it's starting to go up here. So, so it's hard to, the claim is not what the United States, what you do compared to the United States is what you do compared to what you promised and what you've done in the past. So, a little bit of that is that. So, but the other point is, the point where, the thing you talked about at first, the governments and employers have made promises that they cannot now deliver on, right? The balance of how many young to how many old has gotten so out of whack, through cutting birth rates and so forth, that you don't have the money to pay for these pension programs. You don't have the money to give everybody a fat retirement. So you will, but you don't now, right? Because you will get to the point where there's fewer of them, and it'll start to catch up again. Especially, you have a young immigrant population. If that young immigrant population is willing to pay for this stuff, which doesn't go to them, but goes to people that who they are colonizing, essentially. You got some interesting stuff going on there. You got some interesting dynamics. I think that he's going to have to make some kind of deal. But if he makes too much of a deal, if he gives this away, if he gives up on this, I think that this is a no holds barred thing on France, and they could end up being, in the shape that we are very close to being in, which is being insolvent.
Yeah, I mean, we have there's a lot of, we have Social Security as the government, pension system sort of, and though it's not meant to replace everything, when you retire, right? I mean, it's not going to replace all your income. People tend to think, oh, when I get to Social Security, I'm going to be fine. It's like, have you actually looked at the numbers?
That's right.
How much money, how little money y'all actually will get in comparison to probably to what you were earning before. So, it's not quite what you think it is. But, I think about, just the battles that have occurred in various states. And didn't Gina Raimondo, when she was in Rhode Island, didn't she try to reform like police and fire pensions or something like that? And she caught holy hell. They really gave it to her. But what, I will give her credit for trying to attack a problem that was going to basically blow up later. And she was trying to mitigate this issue. And, but everybody's like, but you promised me this now. And so you must meet this obligation. And they're like, okay, but what's going to happen here is that there's not going to be any money left for anybody else. I think Illinois is running into that problem, as well.
Illinois is in terrible shape. California, Cal Pens. The other thing about California is the value of those investments has gone down like 35% since Biden's been president. So like theirs is, you got to meet a cash number. It's not just how the investments do. It's like they've made a promise, we'll pay you this much. And so they're going to be short by an ever growing stack.
Yeah.
They can't fix this.
Yeah, I mean the accounting measures of this thing. This is another thing that bugs the heck out of me, because these promises that are made by these politicians using their pencil pushers, the guys who are with the little green eye shades kind of thing like that, and putting the numbers together, is that the investment return is very lofty, is well above what they will probably generally achieve, right? So I mean, I was looking, and I have basically made zero progress in my net worth, minus my house, just my liquid assets in the last 16 months, right? I'm basically exactly where I was at the end of 2021. And if I'm there, and these other guys are supposed to be professional money managers, probably should be outperforming me, but they can't be outperforming by a very wide measure. Even if they were somehow able to eke out, they guessed it right, and they say they've gained 3 or 4% on the portfolio in the last 16 months. If they manage to do that, if they manage to bet right and take the turns at all the right moments, they're still probably built in assumptions into their pension plans of 7 or 8% in a lot of cases, which means is that they're still falling behind, plus the fact inflation has gone crazy and has also, just put the kibosh on numbers too. So, they have all these things hitting them, and the reality is politicians, they will kick that can down the road, for somebody else to solve and deal with. And,
they won't say no to the workers. They won't say, what we gave you in pension is too generous. What we given you in benefits is too generous. That's what's going on in France, right? Because they made a deal that they can't honor any longer. And, so you're like, hey, no, we got a deal. Well, you sort of had a societal deal, right? It's not really a legal deal. So, societal deals have to change when the circumstances change. So, I don't know. He's in a tough thing, but he is fighting the battle of the next generation, which is to get a rein in the spending, rein in the debt.
Do you think that with all of these problems like this cropping up, that it will give more impetus to governments and then saying like, we're going to get out of the business of these state pensions and basically saying, I think, that it'll become eventually at some point in time, well, most of the people who've worked for state governments and things like that, federal governments, will really be responsible for their own pension. They can invest in the government. The employer can kick in a couple of percent or whatever as a match or whatever, but it's going to be up to them, using index funds or whatever, whatever things, and let them do that, which in essence takes the governments off the hook for those liabilities down the line and puts the onus on, because I mean, don't conservatives in general would have preferred to say, why can't we have had our own money to manage our own money rather than having to kick in this money to Social Security?
Right. So, one of the things that's, conservative have been pushing for a long time is defined contributions instead of defined benefits. So in other words, your employer says, I'm going to give you this much money, and if it's the investment, you can direct how it's invested. It doesn't work out, that's up to you. You have if you can get double that, good for you. You'll be rich. Right. But, it's up to you to do that planning and that homework and so forth. But, this is how much money you will be given. And I think that, this is like in France, it's defined benefit. So we will pay you this much money, no matter what it costs us, right? No matter what our investments say and so forth. So, I mean, the French people are being asked to be partners in the thing that they've abused for this long. And, I think again, we're judging it against our standards, but, the average American gets 2 weeks of vacation, right? Maybe a little bit more when you consider all the seniority out there. They're talking about 5 or 6 weeks. You're not just not 2 weeks and 3 days. We're talking about double or more, right? Even triple what we have, right? 2.5 times what we have. So, at that point, you say, okay, that may be excessive, right? We can't do without people for 6 weeks a year. Maybe they need to, they got to rein that in if they want to be competitive.
Right. And they're not, I don't think they have, I think their average work week is a lot lower than ours too. So
yeah, it's like 33 hours or something.
yeah.
And at some point you got to do the job, right? You've taken all the gains out of productivity, but you want all the gains on the other side. So, at some point you have to pay the other side.
I'm going to slip in this comment from Bob on our climate change here real quick.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good comment there about that. Yeah, I mean, these universities, I mean, it's, bring in those grants and get those studies, and it's like, we will follow that. But, when you're talking about your kids and they can only use certain resources, I'm like, what country are we living in?
Right. And half the EPA budget is grants. What? That's too much, right? To me. I mean, you clean the air and the water. We basically know most of what we need to know about that. That's your job. Implement Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act. If you do that, this other stuff kind of goes away.
Yeah. All right. So what are your thoughts on Cuba and their May Day, the International Workers Celebration, whatever, lack of gas, no parade.
So one of the things they're saying is that people are jipping them. Like they order 600 a day and they get 400 a day. So who's jipping them? I guess Venezuela, the Russians, I mean, you deal with people like that, you get ripped off. Wow. who could have imagined? So, that's part of it. Okay. So, that's sort of good for America. The reason that the petrodollar has been the lead currency for so long is because, its value is reliable. That if I do this deal and you pay me in dollars, I can do something with the dollars that gives me value, right? It's like it sort of assures the contract, so to speak. So they're kind of, we're moving away from the dollar, because of weak foreign policy and other catastrophes to do with the Biden administration. This is, Cuba and Russia and that alignment is jumping the gun on this. And, this is one where they got a little too far ahead.
Yeah, I think if I read correctly, except for COVID, this was the first time they weren't able to have a parade since 1959.
Yeah. Which is, when Castro took over.
Yeah,
so
right.
It's like for the Castro era, this is what they have done, right? And the other thing is like the reason the gas made such a big difference is they bus people in for the parade from all over Cuba, and they couldn't run the buses, and so that's why they decided not to have. They couldn't have a parade that basically nobody came to.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a parade, I mean, it's a big show of force and all this kind of support. But if you can't get the people there, you don't want the coverage of like nobody showed up because you couldn't get them.
You
there.
don't look very supported because you didn't bus in your supporters because you didn't have the gas to get them there.
Yeah, that's kind of unbelievable. This story I love, and I think something we should spend some time on. So we have Title 42 about to expire. I think it's May 11th. Is that the date?
Yeah.
So, I mean, El Paso has been bracing. They talked about, they're kind of steaming up, girding up for this invasion kind of a thing like this. The Biden administration is sending 1,500 troops down to the border, with this. But then you've got Karine Jean-Pierre, saying this thing the other day about it's like, well, it's down 90%. Illegal immigration is down 90%. We've got work to do, but it's basically under control. And it's like, how does this work here? What exactly is going on with this administration and immigration here?
Okay, so she got asked about that. She kind of got cornered on that point, right? And so what she said was, they have a parole program, right? And so the parole program is being used 90% less, probably because you don't really need to sign up at this point, right? You can just go on in the country and try your luck, and you'll probably make it and be fine. So, it's like, yeah, it's so easy to get away with the crime that we're not checking up anymore. We're just going on in and doing it. And they're bragging about that. They think that's an accomplishment.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's just amazing to me, and I've known I said it before, but just like to have this woman as your chief spokesperson is an embarrassment.
It is. So she doesn't know what she's saying half the time. She's reading it out of that book, and she doesn't know what she's, and to be fair to her, they don't really give her good answers. They don't really give her good stuff to say. And so, I mean, the book is what's inside the book is not all that helpful to her. It gets her into even more trouble a lot of times. But to me, it's strange to have someone in there in that position who understands so little about what's in that book, what they're reading. That she finds the page, she reads those words, and then she's stuck, right? Because she can't, you'll notice that, like, you watch these clips, especially when she's dealing with the semi-hostile reporters, which there really aren't any, and the ones that attempt to do it are not really good at it. That's another thing. It's like Fox News is the only one they're going to let in, right? They kind of have to let Fox News in. So Fox News needs to send someone who actually understands the job, right? They send a guy who's got one, he's almost as bad as she is. He has one prepared question, and when it gets blown out of the water, he doesn't know what to do either. He doesn't, think on his feet at all. And I guess his dad's in the business too, and so they're not going to move him or whatever. But he's awful. And that's you'll never get at him like that. The other thing is, though, like yesterday, so I guess she was asking him. So he tried to ask her about the Hunter Biden's daughter that he doesn't acknowledge in Arkansas, and she read the prepared thing and said, "I'm not speaking from the podium on that," and that was it. No follow up. Who's next? Okay, then they call on the next reporter, and this is what tells you America's in a bad place right now. The next reporter should say, answer his question, right? But that's not what they did. They just asked their question. Like, we don't really need whatever truth Fox was trying to make the country understand. We don't need to know that.
Yeah, I try to be kind to Peter Ducey. I mean, his dad's been around for a long time, but I wonder how, the nepotism thing may have gone a little bit too far over here.
Right.
So, you have a seat in the White House press briefing. Put one of your best people in there who can stand the ground and go toe to toe. I mean, Karine Jean-Pierre,
ask a follow up. Actually understand, because you can guess. You can guess her responses most of the time. You can pretty much script the conversation.
Yeah, it's not like Karine Jean-Pierre can go toe to toe with a really strong individual. It's like put a little bit of pushback and she'll fold like a house of cards, right? I mean, she'll just crumble down, and so they don't have the best person in there, and it's a lost opportunity for the conservatives.
It really is
in this case to have that.
They're not going to let any Newsmax or anybody like that in. It's like your Fox is your only one you're going to get.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, can you imagine Tucker Carlson getting a job somewhere and trying to get White House credentials?
Yeah. I mean, they'll just, but see, that's the thing about it is like, they're getting where they can shut down the conservative voice on every issue, right? That's what they're going for. Yeah. Like right now, for instance, they're talking about the debt ceiling, right? Whether to raise the debt ceiling, and the House has passed legislation that says we'll raise the debt ceiling, but there's some other cuts that have to be made. The White House is pushing back through its surrogates, its Democrats in Congress, the media, saying, it's cuts veterans benefits, and you guys don't care about wrecking the economy. The economy's already wrecked. Fortunately, the economy becomes pre-wrecked for this Congress. They can do whatever they want without worrying about wrecking the economy since it's already wrecked. There's a lot of good arguments out there. For one of the things they say, you can't. This is money already spent. You're saying don't say if it was already spent, you wouldn't need borrowing authority, right? That's nonsense. It's not already spent. It's appropriated by Congress, but we haven't signed any check yet, so we can still claw that back. We can still say we're not going to do that. Right. And every government contract, it says, subject to the whims of Congress, they say we don't do this anymore. We can break the contract. All government contracts say that because they have to. Right. So, their whole fight. And then the internet is absolutely full of leftists telling you all the damage that will be done if we don't just pass a clean debt ceiling increase, right? And we're not coming out and saying, what I just said, that, hey, the money's not spent. We can still undo spending that money. And B, how do we ever get the sanity if we just keep saying raise it without any questions, without any cuts, without any attention on fixing our physical house, right? We'll just avoid another disaster and keep going. We're just going to be avoiding disasters, in another year or 8 months or however much they lift it by, right? So, we're not making those arguments, right? The left they're all over the place. They're buying up media all over the place. They're buying ads. We're not. We're just, letting it, metastasize to the point to when it gets to the actual deadline and there's no more money and the Janet Yellen says we'll run out tomorrow, then all the pressure turns on the Republicans to cave.
Yeah, look, I think I've said it before too. I mean, I think Kevin McCarthy and the Republicans. I mean, they did their job. That they passed a measure. Now it's up to the Senate. Supposed to work with Senate's supposed to take this up, and then they're supposed to work on this and come up with a bill, something that that Biden can sign. But the Democrats. I mean, Biden and Schumer and these guys are kind of like, well, this is a non-starter to us. It's not. This is we don't. This is unacceptable. We don't want. This is not. We're not going to talk about this. It's like, well, I think the burden is now on Biden and Schumer to do something about this. They want to try to blame the Republicans, but the Republicans didn't hold this up at this point in time. Republicans are actually trying to do something good for a change, and try to say, look, we want to kind of watch that spending, obviously. The repeal of a lot of these clean energy things, is an anathema to, Biden because it was the signature part of his, Inflation Reduction Act is to have all this stuff, but it's expensive,
88,000 armed IRS agents is expensive.
Yeah. And what do you really get out of that? I mean, I think, what was it? Was it the Congressional Budget Office? I mean, I guess they rated the debt ceiling, bill that was passed by the House, and they were going to cut how many trillions of dollars over the next 10 years or whatever it is, and that's a step in the right direction, but that's not what the Democrats want to hear, and I still think.
But my point is, no one's hearing what you're saying,
right?
You're making an outstanding case and you're explaining it exactly correctly, and that word is not getting out there and competing with it'll throw the economy into shambles and the country will be ruined if we don't just cave and keep getting worse and worse and worse. Where are our people out saying this? Who's saying this?
Yeah, it'd be nice if we had an honest media that would actually report this kind of thing, right?
Right, but you can't. But how many years have you known it's not an honest media? Right. Especially you. You've known that a long time, right? Decades and decades now.
Right.
So it's time to think about Plan B, right?
Yeah. I do want to. I still want to talk about this, but we have a couple comments from Bob I need to throw in here.
Right, that's right. And Trump tried to make him pay.
Yeah,
he got some money out of him.
And then this,
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Bob, you're right. I mean, on these things, it's just particularly with I definitely have this issue with Karine Jean-Pierre because I just this is just to me a national embarrassment to have someone like that be your White House spokesperson who is that incompetent. And it's like, of all the people you could have chosen from to replace Jen Psaki, you chose her. But once again, this to me is that underlying problem of this administration of their whole thing about we have to have all this diversity, this equity, this inclusion,
box checkers,
right? So you have to do this. So what is his cabinet full of? All these people,
box checkers. They're all box checkers,
right? So they've done that. You can't exactly fire the box checkers because then what does that do to the people who pushed him there and helped him get him elected? But who was that person with the luggage thing? The stealing the luggage.
Yeah, he was just supposed to safeguard nuclear waste. That's all he had to. We don't really need anybody good for that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just what an abject disaster. And yet, once again, back to the media. there gets to be there's a little bit of attention paid for this, but not a lot, right? It
Right.
kind of
And it's like his bosses, right? Department of Energy, ooh, Department of Interior. What a wreck. What a train wreck that is. So somebody got her the other day and said, you're for, you want, I guess it was Josh Hawley said, you want to change all this stuff from gas to electric, but all the stuff you need to make electric motors, we're dependent on China for. Right. And our efforts to get out of being dependent on China for, you go around blocking all the time. And she's like, well, it was talking about a project in Minnesota. She says, well, those are tribal waters. It's like, everything's tribal waters, lady. I mean, if you're not taking it any more seriously than that, then, don't be surprised when we do stuff, when we can't wait on you anymore.
Yeah, I mean, and I think somebody or someone made somebody made the point about a lot of the stuff with these things that we're dealing with clean energy, whether it's solar panels or wind turbines or whatever, is that if you go back to the thing, a lot of this stuff will be made in China and India, huge polluters. I mean,
Yeah.
they're huge users of fossil fuels, and so it's like, so once again, and the battery issue, with the lithium batteries, it's like, this is not like all the stuff that you're using in these electric, things and all these green energy things, were made with clean energy.
Right. I mean, you're making things worse, right? And it seems to be that like you're just aimed at combustion engines, right? And it's like they're not the problem. That's not the problem.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just it's an interesting thing there where there's a huge push, obviously, towards electric cars and things like that. Elon Musk is trying to, he's trying to make sure he keeps his market share up. He's sacrificing his profits by cutting the price of Tesla, but people aren't sure whether or not that is he how much is he sacrificing profit for market share, or is this also a little signal of the electric car market may be a little bit saturated at this point.
It's very soft. They're
And
very
the demand really isn't there.
Maintenance issues and expensive driving, inconvenience of what you got to do to fuel them up.
Yeah, I mean, I was just reading an article in the journal the other day about so they had done an article about hotels and chargers, right? And they had talked to some people who have EVs, and they when they do travel, when they do road trips, they need to find chargers, and not a lot of hotels have chargers, and when they do have chargers, they're kind of low level chargers. So you have, this is not the fast chargers, this is the slower ones. So you basically would need hours and hours to get your vehicle back up to snuff. And if you've only got two, there's issues which we've heard of before from other places, of shopping malls and things where chargers are broken, they're not working, right? Or people are hogging them, and so then what do? There are two chargers, and you need a charge, and they're both being used. How do you find who the owner is of the car to say, can I now juice up? Can I share this or do something? So it's a difficult equation, because it's, for hotel owners, I mean, there's a market out there. I mean, there are people who bought EVs and want to be able to have convenience, but what's the cost benefit ratio to the hotels to get those things installed? How does this pay off for them in the long run? Is that actually an extra perk? Does that really get more people to say, yeah, I want, I'm going to stay there because you've got an EV charger. Oh, by the way, we've only got two, but we've got 10 EVs in the parking lot tonight, so somebody's not going to get their car charged.
Right.
There's just so many issues that we're going at that this is not going to be solved in the time frame that the liberals think it's going to be solved in.
Right. They think it's going to be solved in 12 years.
Yeah, I mean, right. I mean,
I don't know, maybe, but you don't really see any movement toward it now, so it's kind of hard to imagine it.
And I will admit, I mean, when they were talking about 2035 and some of the other things about 2050, my first impression was, well, that's a long way off. But actually, 12 years is not that long off. I mean, time does move on, and the next thing you know, it'll be 2030, and stuff like that. And it's like, and then 2035, and it's like, so what are we doing here? Where are we? Based on what we're seeing right now, we're not going to make the targets.
We're not close.
Yeah.
And what point are they going to tell us this and what we're going to do about it? I mean, what would you do if you're 40% from your target?
Yeah. Well, then you move the goalposts again, right?
Right.
And you find other ways of doing things. But as you mentioned before, I mean, the thing about it is that for us, there's a lot of things that we've been used to in our lives that are going to continue to get more expensive because of this green push, right? I mean, whether it's the change of where you can't have a gas range in a restaurant or your home, or now your air conditioner has got to be, they ban more of the refrigerants, so you can only use this stuff, meaning that there's a handful of refrigerants that they can use for the environment because of the ozone layer issue that they talk about. And then there's a limited supply, but there's huge demand, so the price will inevitably go up. I'm sitting here thinking like, this is not good, because at some point in time, my 23-year-old air conditioner, so my house is big enough, it's got those 2 units, those 2 zones, but I don't use the one upstairs a whole lot. We don't stay up there a lot, so it's lasted. The one that was used a lot, I think it failed within the year that we had moved in. And at that time, the house was only about 5 years old or something. Builder's grade. This is what you get with builder's grade. So that one is aging. The newer one is aging, but the other one is pretty old. I'm thinking, it's like, when that shoe drops, or when my furnace fails, I'm going to be facing some huge issues. My water heater is like, I just can see all the regulations just are going to force you to do things. I see things on Nextdoor where people are talking about, how do we get a relatively inexpensive, water heater? The quotes I'm getting are $5,000 or $6,000 to replace a water heater.
Wow.
That's a staggering sum for people who probably haven't saved the money to handle that.
Right. There's people going to just not have a water heater,
or they're going to put it on their credit card, or they're going to take out some kind of loan, and with interest rates the way they are, this is, that $6,000 water heater is going to be an $8,000 or $9,000 water heater by the time you pay it off. All kinds of ramifications for this that are out there.
That's right.
And everything. I did want to touch on, at least for a little bit, this First Republic Bank failing. So we've had 3 bank failures this year. I think I guess we're past the big problem now. We've had these bank failures, and it was just, a lot of issues had come to the fore there with that. And, the FDIC stepped in there, and they basically have gotten the big banks to take over Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic Bank, made a lot of people nervous about regional banks and things like that. But what it does is it puts people like Elizabeth Warren on the warpath again, right? We needed more, we do this, but doesn't some of this, I mean, this whole Dodd-Frank legislation, I mean, wasn't that also kind of a problem for all of this? It also, it didn't solve any problems. It probably created some problems.
Well, Barney Frank made the point that nothing Donald Trump did to defang Dodd-Frank caused any of this. I don't know why he did that, but he did do that. And I always kind of found him to be an honest broker, if solidly on the wrong side of most issues, that he seemed to me like a straight shooter in my dealings with him. The things that got the Silicon Valley Bank in trouble were woke policies, woke lending practices, woke favoritism in hiring. They got too leftist for their own good. And I suspect that may be the case with some of these others. And they're, loaning to woke projects, but not to unwoke projects and so forth. And the woke projects don't pan out. They lose money, and they go broke, right? And that's a lot of what happened to those banks. But you have a huge amount of inflation that is in the last 2 years, a huge amount of quantitative easing, basically printing money. debt through the roof. So like the underpinnings of the U.S. economy are really as bad a shape as they've been since the Great Depression. So usually we have the stability behind the banking system to where, even fairly big mistakes can be smoothed out and the bank itself doesn't have to close. But we're to the point now where, the USA has been living paycheck to paycheck for so long now that, its finances are strained to the limit and we can't really protect stuff anymore.
Yeah, I think Vivek Ramaswamy, I mean, I think he's made some points recently about, a lot of the things that have been happening lately too, go back to some of the Fed policies under Greenspan and Bernanke. I mean, kind of that easy money, the low interest rates, kept it low for a long time. Powell didn't adjust either. Brainerd, when she was on there, also was a low interest, kind of hawk. And the markets got used to that, right? Like there was all this, and these banks, part of the problem, besides the fact that they were some of these other things that you mentioned, is that they invest in these bonds, and bonds have been, they're generally a safe investment. But when interest rates, and inflation ramp up like it did, it creates a problem. So that those bonds are worth less than they paid for them. Now they can cash out at maturity, but if you've got people, taking money out of your bank, and then you've got to meet those, those withdrawal demands, and you got to start cashing out those bonds at less than you paid for them, it just becomes a spiral that becomes a huge problem. And they've got to put a plug in it and figure out how to deal with that. But the Fed has got to take some blame for this as well, where the government policies just kind of push these things along. They gave a lot of these, these companies and the banks thinking like, oh, well, we're doing fine. We got past the 2008, 2009 financial crisis. We have all these stress, checks and everything like that. And, all these things that they have had on there, and we're going to be okay. But then, then came inflation like we haven't seen in 40 years. And, that's all you need. It's almost like, there's never going to be inflation like that again. I mean, I don't think I'd ever expect to see that. But, thank you, Joe Biden, and your policies for helping ramp that up. For, what are you doing now? The best you can say is that it's cooling. Well, I'm so relieved that's cool from 5.8 to 4.2 or something like that. Some of the core rate or whatever. It's like, that's a big relief to me. It's like, it's going to help me a whole lot when I go to the grocery store, because I'm still seeing it, and everybody else is still seeing it.
Yeah. And it's not, and it's actually, the way they measure it, it's actually more like about 7 or so. And it was 1.4 when he came in. So, you're talking about 5.8. You're still talking about 4 times what it was when he took office.
Yeah, I mean, we have so many different measures of inflation at different things, whether or not it's the core rate or the, the headline, the CPI rate, things like that. The bottom line in the end is that it's still a heck of a lot higher than it was when Biden came in.
Right. We're looking at a fresh set of those numbers Friday, right?
Yeah.
Employment numbers, growth numbers, and so forth, and inflation numbers. And, it could be a rough Friday for the president because, inflation has gone back up. It's back on the warpath. Energy prices are climbing again fairly rapidly, and hiring has slowed almost zeroed out in the country. And there's massive layoffs, all over the place. We saw last week, there was 3 or 4 major corporations announced, layoffs of thousands of people. So, it's not getting better, right? It's not like Biden's figured out how to fix it. It's getting worse.
Yeah. Companies are bracing for a recession. I mean, I had a friend of mine who'd been working in Amazon over at BWI, been doing that for years. And, he messaged me, he says, he'd been let go by Amazon. It wasn't his choice, and so he's there. Now he's, trying to find another job and everything like that. But these companies are looking down the line. They're saying like, we think the economy is just not going in the right direction, and we need to brace ourselves and prepare ourselves for slowing sales, slowing revenues. Therefore, overhead needs to be cut. And so so the economy is not something Biden has a leg to stand on at this point in time whatsoever. Right. And when you mention, government, paycheck to paycheck kind of thing, is that one of the other effects of high inflation, higher interest rates is that we have to pay more on our debt. So so that creates yet another problem for us. So and if Biden's got to do something, I mean, he's got to do something about the debt ceiling. I mean, Janet Yellen, says June 1st potentially. Trying to scare, I think, the Republicans, but the Democrats are the ones who need to be worried about this, because there's no reason for me to think that the Republicans should move on this at all. They shouldn't have to. They shouldn't have to budge.
But if that works, if they stick with that strategy and it works, that will be a sea change in how these things are handled.
Oh yeah,
right? Because with the it's on the trajectory for the usual script, which is we hold out till we look completely like jerks, and then we give in, right?
Right.
And we let them paint us as jerks who won't just pay the bills.
All right, time to wrap it up, Brian.
Okay, there's a couple of things. One is I want to caution people that the Democrats, they're not interested in Roe anymore. Roe, they think they're going to take care of legislatively at some point when they get control of both houses of Congress, which probably could happen. In the next 15 or 20 years, they'll get a chance to codify Roe. What they're going after now is Marbury. They are going after the concept of judicial review. They're saying courts should not be able to decide things are constitutional or unconstitutional, and what laws we actually have to live by. That they don't have that power. They got it illegitimately. I had a guy, Antifa guy, tell me the other day that a former Antifa guy, he says that that was the first unconstitutional decision. It was Marbury versus Madison. I'm like, well, no one's ever challenged the constitutionality of it. So to say that it is not laid out in the Constitution, it was, Justice Marshall, saying, I'm going to rule in, I guess it was Madison's favor, right, against the Jefferson contingent, right? And this is what gives me the power to rule, right? This is why I think I can say this and that this will carry force of law. So they're going after that. They're attacking that because it's, they realize it's 6-3. That's the whole point of this, attack on Clarence Thomas and all this other stuff that they're trying to do. They tried to compel John Roberts to testify before Congress. And then they're like, oh, he refused our demands. It's like, yeah, he's a head of a co-equal branch of government. You ever call the president down there to explain all his lies? No, you do not, right? So because he wouldn't have to come, he would tell you to pound sand, and that's what happened here. So that's a very important thing that people need to worry about. And I did want to say, Cardin saying he's not going to run. We have finally found something useful for Larry Hogan.
That's right.
Larry Hogan come out of the woodwork. This is something that, he'd be a Mitt Romney. He wouldn't be a reliable vote, but we could get control of committees and subpoena power and do some good stuff and steal a seat from them that they, they don't anticipate at all that they could lose it. And, he's as useless as he is, he can possibly pull that off. And finally, I guess 2 days ago, we're riding on the car. My daughter's sort of the disc jockey. She controls the YouTube and plays the music through the radio, right? And she was starting to play The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. And I said, dope. And I wish I would know because we lost Gordon Lightfoot this week, who was a great singer, performer from Canada with a bunch of songs that kind of hit you in the soul.
Yep. The Wreck of Edmund Fitzgerald was a great song. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again this week. Hope you enjoyed it. Please, as always, stay safe and say well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And God bless America. We're going to be off next week, but we'll be back in 2 weeks.